Okay, and so welcome to the module, and I should put the module title there, CST315, and it's about the app development, particularly using the, how do I say, the web-based technology to develop the apps. So this week, and it will just give an overview of what module will cover and what the coursework will be like. And from the next week on, we will start covering the actual technical details. And okay, so let's start. And okay, so this is a relatively new module in the department. So last year we had the first run of the module, and this year is the second run. So obviously it has been quite popular in terms of app development. So before that, I used to supervise final year projects, and lots of students want to develop apps. And then because of that, I created this module. Okay, and because the module is quite new, so I'm still making some changes based on the feedbacks I got from last year. So this is both related to the lecture slabs and also the assessment. But I mean, it will be relatively stable, or maybe some small changes, not too big. And but you can see currently on the module page, and you'll be able to see the lecture slides and the recorded videos from last year. And you can have a look because the content will be still definitely relevant. But as we progress, these will be replaced. For example, I'm recording all the lectures this year, and these will replace the lecture recording from last year once they become available. Okay, and also compared to last year, and I'm sure most of you are not here, and there will be some changes as well in terms of how the module will run. So I'll try to have more live coding sessions. In the sense, live coding sessions may be something similar as you would find on YouTube. People will be coding and talk over how the code is done, something like that, and less slides. So we're going to see less of these. Obviously, for this first lecture, it will be all slides and no coding. And from next week on, we try to have more live coding sessions and less slides. And okay, and so this is maybe the second point is maybe more relevant to the students who were here last year or know the module last year. And we use a range of different softwares. And this year we plan to move everything online. For example, when you're creating your app, we're going to host the app online. When it needs database, it will be hosted online, and same for the backend server. So all these will be online. Will become clearer later on as we go. I have a message. And we have a question from Marcel in the chat. It says, does it mean we are going to deploy it? And kind of. And so we're going to make them public, so you can accessible online in the sense, but not quite as deploying in terms of a product. You're going to make it available to the public. So it just says it's that. Yeah, and hope that answers your question. And that's very good. So if you have questions, and you can, I think it's probably easier just to type in the chat. And you could also raise your hand if you have difficulty typing in the chat, and I'll try to, and you can then answer. Sorry, I'll try to answer in the class. Okay. Okay, and a little bit background in terms of mobile app development. So there are two different ways, and some of you might be aware. The first one is called native app development. So this is using the programming language specific for mobile systems, such as iOS or Android. These are two of the big ones. There used to be, say, Windows, Office even back, and you have BlackBerry as well, but these two are mostly disappeared now. And so for each systems, it needs its own developing languages and tools. And so on the iOS, it's mostly Objective-C, which is the kind of very, very old C language, maybe it's more than 30 years old. It was used to develop other applications on Mac as well. And the more recent one is Swift. So on Android, then the native development is mostly done in Java, and more recently, there's a new variation of Java called Kotlin. Um, Kotlin is kind of like the simplified version of Java, maybe maybe a bit closer to Python. And so the advantage of doing native app development is they are fast, in the sense the app developed this way, they can take full advantage of whatever hardware acceleration available on the phone, so they will run fast. And it's have access to all the low-level features, in the sense you can access, for example, cameras, sensors, GPS, or even say memories, storage, etc. on your phone quite easily. So in some of the cases, it's not necessary, but in others, it might be useful. Okay, and then in terms of disadvantage of this native app development is it only works on one mobile system. In the sense, if you develop an iOS app, it only works on iOS device. It would not working on any Android device. And the same way, and it's the same for the other way around. So if you develop an Android app, it does not work on any iOS device. So not working on iPhone or iPad, etc. And you need to learn a new language and OS tools. So if you want to do both, you have to learn at least 2 different languages, and they all have its own set of tools. Okay, and finally, and these apps does not work on the web, so they only strictly run on the respect platforms. So the an iOS app will only work on iPhone, iPad. It doesn't work on, say, in the web browser. So as a result, for example, if a company you want to cover all the mobile platforms and the web, then usually means you have to develop 3 times if you do native app development. So one for iOS, one for Android, and one for the app. And they're all quite different because they're using completely different languages and tools to develop. Okay, and so there's another way called hybrid app development. So it uses one language, which is independent of the mobile systems. So the language could be JavaScript, and there's different libraries help you to do that. For example, native script, reactive native, or Ionic. Actually, now I'm gonna just test one of the features in the Zoom. So if you open up the participant list, you should see some buttons or icons at the bottom of the participant list. It will say yes, no, go slower, go faster, more, etc. So I just want to say, if you heard any of these before, native script, React Native, or Ionic, can you click yes? And if you haven't heard of those before, please click no. So I can get a sense of what has been covered previously, or your background. And also just testing out the features. Yeah, good. I see quite a few. And click the button already. So yeah, you need to open up the participant list, and then actually I might just show it quickly so you can see what it looks like. Why it disappeared? And so this is what it looks like on my screen in terms of voting. I'll make it a bit smaller so I can see. So for me, you have to click the participant list, and which then show up the list. And then you can see the button here, yes, no. You can actually use other things as well. And for me, I can see, okay, what everyone's and clicked for. And so we might use this a bit more later as well, so we can see what is and how well that's covered already or not. Okay, so at least some of you know, but many didn't know yet, and that's completely okay. We're gonna go into a bit more details about these later. And doing hybrid development, it doesn't have to be, say, using JavaScript, and you can also use .NET or C#, and then there's a different library to do this called Xamarin or something, and there's a similar package for other languages as well. And so the advantage of doing this type of app development is it works on both Android and iOS. So it's the way it's designed allows you to work on both operating systems. And you can choose the programming languages and tools you already know. And for example, if you're already familiar with JavaScript, you can use the same language and the same tools. It does not require any changes. Just have to use a specific library for it. And also works online as well. And this is particularly true for JavaScript because JavaScript itself would run in browser anyway. And for the other languages, may need further conversion to make sure it's working online as well. Okay, and so obviously, you can't have everything. So there's some disadvantage as well using this type of approach. And the first is slightly slower than native apps. I think we mentioned before, for the native apps, you can take full advantage or use all the low-level features, whereas and these methods or libraries essentially, and it adds an extra layer before your code and the actual phone hardware. So that the actual layer will slow things down a little bit, but that performance difference is relatively small. And for example, if you are not doing, say, a computer graphics intensive app, for example, like a game, for example, you need an app, something similar to, for example, social network like Facebook, and you probably would not be able to tell any performance difference now. And also it requires plugins to access the low-level features. And so that's just because the nature and of how this library works. And they usually do not have direct access, for example, to the sensors on your phone or GPS, and you might need using additional plugins. And yeah, also, if you've got any questions, just raise your hands or type your questions in the chat, and I'll try to answer as we go. Okay, and actually, okay, so first, and for this module, we're going to cover the second method only, which is hybrid app development. And partly because all of you would have done the second year web development module, which covers lots of the foundations needed to do this type of development. Whereas if we use other things, we have to cover a new language from the beginning. And most of you use the apps are already hybrid apps. And so Facebook, Instagram. So basically Facebook owns Instagram and Facebook has its own hybrid app framework, which is the Reactive Native we've seen in the last slides. And lots of Facebook apps are developed that way. So that including Facebook, Instagram, Airbnb, Uber, Discord, Skype, Tesla, Pinterest, and lots of others. So these probably cover some of the most used or most popular apps already, and they are already developed in hybrid app approach. And you probably can't really tell the difference between those and the other apps which are developed using the native development approach. Okay, and then now we're going to go to a little bit more details in terms of exactly the things that will be covered in this module. And so it will cover obviously the app development, so including a framework, and which is called Vue.js. Okay, and so first maybe just a quick question saying, does anyone heard of Vue.js before? Can I see a show of buttons, cross or tick in the participant list? Wow, okay. Yeah, and among the people who clicked, quite a few of them already heard of it, which is good. And it's certainly getting popular and popular. Okay, and related to that, APIs. Okay, so I have another like a comment from Marcel in the chat. It says, you used Axios and in the last year for the REST API. So Axios is a useful library when you say to accessing the backend. This year, we're gonna ask you to do fetch first using promise and before you allow to use Axios. But that's something we're going to discuss later until the second stage of the module, or the second phrase, or second part of the module. Okay, so I guess that question is related to this part. And so the second part of the module, okay, sorry, I was talking about the Vue.js, and so that will be maybe the first third, like 8 weeks of the module. We're going to focus on Vue.js. Obviously, if you haven't heard of it or haven't never used it, that's completely fine. We can definitely cover more details a little bit later. So the second part, we're going to talk more about the backend. So the Vue.js is more like the front end of your app. So the part user can see that runs on the phone. Whereas the backend is where you store the data. So we need to use Node.js, which is like the server and allows you to host and database like MongoDB. And I assume most of you would have used it. We're going to using express.js. And this is something allows us to create an interface between the front end and the backend. So we don't want the view to talk to MongoDB directly, which will have to go through Express. We're going to explain why do you want to do that later. Okay, and then we can also talk about progressive web apps. And so these are the apps that you can, how do I say, run on your phone. It will in full screen mode, almost looks at like a native app. The only difference will be you actually just don't have to put them, say, into the Google Play or what is App Store, and you can just open the URL and from the online and you can add to your phone. And the final part of the module, we're going to talk about actually the mobile app development. So while this one, progressive web apps, looks and behaves very similar to an app, but it's not quite yet. So the actual mobile app will be something you can add to the Google Play or App Store and behave very and almost the same as native apps. Okay. If it is okay, and also we're going to cover some other things along the way. So the first thing is Git. Anyone? How many of you heard of Git before? Again, can I see a show of tick and cross? Oh, okay. I mean, the majority, the people kind of polled and indicate so far actually have already heard it. So it's very useful tools. Essentially, it allows you to keep a history of all the changes you made to your code. And we can also using GitHub, which allows you to store your code online. Then it will never happen saying my USB broken or my laptop is lost and I lost all my work. That will never happen again. And also going to talk something about ES6, which is which is the more recent standard of the plain JavaScript. So just think of JavaScript have different versions, and each new version may make some changes or add new features. You can have JavaScript 2015, JavaScript 2017, etc., etc. So this is one of the, I think maybe this is the 2015 version, and it's not that new yet already, but it's introduced some it's one of the versions which has some fairly significant changes, and we're going to introduce them as we go along as well. Okay, and this is the part about the testing. And so there's two possibilities. One is using Jest, and the other one is using Cypress. And in industry, testing is critical in terms if you want to write your, say, product quality apps. And we'll see. And we haven't quite decided which one to use and where to use them. Okay, and oh, I think I'm going a little bit too fast. Yeah, and also we'll use introducing something called MPN, which comes with Node.js. It's a package manager, and it allows you to install different libraries you might need and when you develop the code. And so this is something useful to have because what happens is if you want to install a library, for example, I don't know, express.js library for your code, but this library itself might depend on other libraries. And those other libraries may further depend on some other libraries, and this can go on. And then if you only install Express, it will not work. It will need all the dependencies, which are the libraries and it relies on, and the dependency of dependencies, etc., etc. And so then this kind of NPN or the package manager, which is I think it's Node package manager, would help you do this for you to automatically find all the dependencies and install them together, so you can use it without have to worry about install each individual dependency. Okay. Okay, and then so in terms of the lectures and the labs, so it's a little bit different from the other modules. The lectures will be 1.5 hours, and the labs will be 1.5 hours as well. I think some of the other modules, or most of them, will have 1 hour lectures and 2 hour labs. And for me, I just find the 1 hour lecture a little bit short, and I was not able to cover everything we need. So I decided to make it a little bit longer for the lecture. As I already mentioned, the lecture will be recorded and made available online afterwards. So the current recordings on the module page are from last year. So they will be replaced and as the new lecture becomes available. Okay. And so I also mentioned I plan to do more live coding so I can show you step by step in the lecture how the code is done rather than say just give you the final solutions. So bring your laptop, or you probably would have been using your laptop anyway, and try to code along if you can. And it might be a little bit difficult to completely follow everything in the lecture, but at least give it a try. And if you have any questions, you can just ask straight away. Okay, and then the entire module will be project-based. So essentially, we want to build a very an e-commerce app, and it's actually helping people to find after-school lessons. And then this entire project will be break up into 3 parts. These are 3 courseworks, and that essentially the entire module is like one big project. Okay, so that's everything about the lectures. Okay, and I also saw another chat question that is saying, is Vue.js the only framework we can use? And the answer is yes. We can discuss that a little bit maybe next week when we start introducing Vue. And we want to use Vue, mostly just Vue for this module. And because we will not be able to cover any other modules, any other frameworks, even they might be similar. But this, okay, does not stop you from using other libraries, which is a bit different from framework. For example, if you want to use Bootstrap to make your website look a bit better, that's completely fine. And okay, next part is about the lab. It will be 1.5 hours, and it will be mostly group-based exercise. And actually, some of the group exercise also will be marked as well, contribute to the final mark. We're going to see that in the next few slides when we talk about the coursework or the assessment for the module. And any question so far? Yeah, yeah, just keep typing them in the chat. And if I didn't notice, then maybe raise your hand as well so I can check. Okay. Yeah, so the lectures will be on Zoom. I think it's better than the other platforms I tried. And if you are here, obviously all of you would have found that link already, one way or another. So some of you might see that in the email I sent last week, and some of you, but also the link is on the module page. I know if I could. So I just want to show you quickly where the link is. So let me first go to the module. Yeah, so this is our module, CST3145, web-based mobile app development. Yeah, it's a very long title. And if you look at this welcome page, and this is the module handbook, which is very important, which is what you need to read today after the lecture. And that's the Zoom link. And this is for UK students. We also run this overseas, so we use different ways. But if you just click the link, that should lead you to this kind of Zoom meeting. And it's the same for the lectures and the labs. So you get the same link. Yeah, again, just repeating, I'm going to put the recordings online after the lecture. Yeah, still recording. Let's hope it goes well. Okay, and the labs will be using Zoom too. And so we use exactly the same Zoom link as I just showed before, which is just this one here, the Zoom link. And the difference is all the labs will not be recorded. And so partly because lab is mostly just discussions between the students and them. So also partly because we are not allowed to record you unless I would got your explicit consent. And this is not really necessary anyway. Okay, and the group lab work will use Zoom breakout groups. And so essentially, it's like you can have multiple Zoom meetings at the same time and one for each group. So I will set it up and and then each group will work in their Zoom meeting. You can see each other but cannot see the other groups. And I will moving between the groups and to help you answer your questions. Okay, and the one last thing is, so for the marked group work, definitely, you need to require to demonstrate it as a group, and then you will need to share your computer screens. You not necessarily to show your face, but you definitely need to share your voice and share your screens. Just a little bit warning. Okay, I got a few questions about group. So the first one is, how many people? Okay, Let's just keep changing. So first question is, how many people will there be in groups? So I would say about 5. So we don't want the group to be too big then, and just make sure there's enough for everyone to contribute. Can we choose our own groups? And the answer is yes. So that's actually what we're gonna do next week. We didn't have any lab this week. We are starting next week. Next week's lab will be forming the groups. That's just mostly what we do next week. You're going to meet your other people in the same lab. You can form your groups. So I think I answered that as well. So you can choose your own group mate. That will be done next week. And there's a what about attendance? So you might talking about the attendance recording. I'm not sure exactly, but we basically just use whatever the university decide to use. And it used to be you log in using an app. Certainly that would not work this year because everyone is attending remotely, and we're not using anything different from whatever the university decides to use. And there's questions saying, how many of us in a group? So I think roughly 5. And the question says, can we have a group of 3? The only problem with that is that might end up with too many groups. And so if we have a class of 24 or something, 20 something students, you can have 8 or even 9 groups. Might be a bit too many, but we'll see. We'll see. Okay. So Osnek has a problem, not problem, a question about the different module, and I would leave others to reply. But just to say, in terms of distinction, this other module mentioned advanced web, the big data, and it's more about the backend. But there is some overlap between the two modules. For example, I think both modules covers Vue, but to a very different extent. So here we spend about 8 weeks initially, and then come back to the last third as well. So in total, maybe half the time. Whereas the big data module may just only spend 2 weeks, something on the cover very the basic things about the Vue. Okay, and we're gonna just move on with the slides now. Okay, so that's the schedule, which is cover the entire page. So we are in week 1, so that's the overview. And from the week 2 to week 7, that's the kind of the first part of the module, well, mostly focused on Vue. We're going to cover Git as well. So week 8 will be when the first coursework was due. So this will be the group coursework, sorry, the individual coursework, whereas the group coursework will be demonstrated during the lab between week 2 and 7. We're going to come, I think that will be covered in the next few slides. Okay, and the second part from the week 9 to week 14. So we're going to talk about, say, the backend you need for an app. So this includes in Node, Express, and MongoDB, and also talk about progressive web apps. And coursework 2 will due in week 15. And so the third part and the last part of the module run from week 16 to 21. We're going to actually talk about creating mobile apps with native script. So we're going to using the more advanced tools in Vue, and also talk about a particular library called Native Script Vue. So that's a flavor of native script which is designed to support to work with Vue framework. And week 22 will be the coursework radio. So the entire year will have 24 weeks, and we're gonna have the last coursework due on week 22. And the 2 weeks after that will be do the demonstration of the coursework. Okay, I can explain that very soon in the next few slides. Okay. And so Zach had a question about the exams. And again, it will be covered in the assessment section, but briefly, there's no exams for this module, only coursework. And so that's the reading list for the module. That's also available on the module page. If you go to module page, you should see this one here. And if you click, it shows up like this. Okay. And then you will see this is the main textbook called Vue.js in Action. And that's the one we're going to be following, mostly about the Vue. And this is another book to introducing Git. And there's some other books about Node.js. These are the other things we need to cover. And just very quickly, and did anyone have access to the Vue.js in Action yet? So that I selected that one as the personal e-textbook. So you should have a copy. Can I again see a show of hands? Either yes or no now in the participant list? Oh, okay. Okay, some people already received it. So that means that should starting already become available. But looks like, or maybe the people who indicated the half-half. Some of them have it yet already. Okay, yeah, some people get the books delivered already. Okay, that's all very good. I see. Okay, so it looks like the book is delivered as a hard copy instead. So I guess maybe it's the time of delivery. So just make sure you had the right systems in this right address in the university system, then it got delivered to you. Yeah. Each module would have one free book, so you would have more than one, certainly. One for this module and at least a couple of others, and for the other modules. Okay, Marcel, what is that? Please stop. Okay, you just want to showing the book, yeah. But you probably have to turn off the background, otherwise we can't see the book. Yeah, exactly. And I can also show you very quickly. So that's what the books look like. Yeah, so that's what the book look like. Yeah. Okay, and I'm gonna continue. Okay, we'll kind of mentioned this already. So now comes to the assessment part of the module that I already said. So we don't have any exams, will be coursework only. And we have 3 courseworks. And 1, 2, and 3. The first 2 is 35%, and the last one is 30%. And we're going to go into a little bit more later. Okay, yeah. So each coursework will including 1 marked in-lab tasks, which will count for 10%. And so, for example, the first coursework will be in total 35%. So yeah, and then the 10% of that will be the in-lab task, and the remaining 25% will be the individual task or work. And the in-lab task, yeah, needs to be completed in groups and demonstrated in lab. So this is like so the lab work is group work. Okay, yeah. So every group member is expected to contribute, but more importantly, when you present the work, you need to be there. The people not there will not get any mark. Oh. Okay, and then you need overall 40% to pass the module, which shouldn't be too difficult. For example, if you be there for all the group work demonstration, that should get you already something close to 30%, assuming you actually, the group actually do all the 3 lab tasks. And then you just need another 10% more from the 3 coursework to pass. That shouldn't be too hard. And it is not required to pass each coursework to pass the module. I know some module requires that, but here it doesn't matter. For example, if you miss 1 or even 2, yeah, in theory it's possible, 2 coursework, but it still might be a chance you can pass. Okay, and then all the coursework have to be demonstrated in lab. So this including both the group and individual ones. So if you did not demonstrate, you will not receive any mark or you will receive 0 mark, even if you submit it. So it did happen last year. Some people just don't want to demonstrate and didn't really give me any reason says why they can't. Then they didn't get any marks for the work they submitted in the end. Okay, and then the coursework component not explained properly during the demonstration will also receive 0 mark. So what this means is you need to demonstrate your work, but also you have to be able to explain what the code is doing. Because it does happen before, people would just say, pay someone else to write the code for them. And when they come to demonstration, they have basically no clue what the code is, why it's doing certain things. Sometimes it might be difficult to prove that these work are created by other people, but it did happen as well. But also, basically, if you cannot explain your code, which you're supposed to write your own self, which will be very odd, and in that case, you will not get mark for the part you can't explain. Okay, and we have a question from Ignis. Says, do we get to know on which labs we do demonstrate our lab work? And so this will become clearer later on, but let me see if it's already on the module page. No, it's not yet. But the general rule is for the individual work, and it is always the 2 weeks after the submission deadline. For example, coursework 1 is due in week 8. Then we will do the individual work demonstration in the lab during week 9 and week 10. And the next coursework due week 15, then we're going to do the demonstration in the lab in week 16 and 17, and so on. Okay, and for the group demonstration, and you will see clearly, usually for example, the first group work will be given in week, can't remember now, maybe 6, no, maybe week 5, and then the demonstration will be done the week after in the lab, so it'll be week 6. Okay, hopefully that answer the question. Okay, let's look a little bit more about the okay. So I have another question from Alexandra. When are we going to find out the exact date of the submission? And the exact date will be always the 5 p.m. the Friday of the week that is due. But obviously this will be also set on the submission page. So for coursework 1, it will be 5 p.m. on the Friday of week 8. And also, if you go to the module page currently, and if you open up the assessment and feedback, and okay, these needs to be updated, and it's just copied from last year. But if you click this one, okay, and so this is showing me as a lecture. If I switch to student, yeah, and it will tell you when that should be due. So this is the due date for last year, and it was 5 p.m. on the Friday of that day, which is the Friday of the week 8 last year. So it will be the same this year.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. We have another question. So will we have to prepare the group exercise during the whole week or just during the 1.5 lab sessions? Okay, I think it really depends on the group, and the group work is certainly much less amount of work compared to the individual one, and there is a chance that the group might be able to finish that in the lab. But in many cases, you might not be able to. Then you have to spend a bit more time after the class. Basically, you have a 1 week to work on it, but doesn't mean you need entire week time to work on it. Okay. Yeah, coming back to the slides. And for the first coursework, you're creating the front end of a web app that allows students and parents to look after school classes and activities. So basically, people can search for, say, after school math tutoring or English or, I don't know, piano or music, something. Okay, and it must use Vue because that's what we can be covering. And we're going to be hosting it on GitHub, which is the code. So you have to put your code online onto GitHub and with at least 10 commits. So if you don't understand, essentially 10 commits is like you have to save 10 different versions of a code. You start from the very beginning with a few lines of code, which is not working at all, to the last one, which is a completely working code or whatever the version you submit. Okay, and also we're going to cover something called the GitHub Pages, which will allow you to host your app online. Essentially, that means you runs your app in the browser, not on your. It always runs the browser. So basically, anyone if has the links to your app, they can open it in your browser. You don't have to have access to a computer to do that. Okay, I'll cover the last point before we answer the question. The web app must be demonstrated in lab in person. Okay, so that's the same. I think I mentioned this a few times already. So basically, all the work needs to be demonstrated, and then the same for the lab. Marcel, I don't think the lab group marking is fair. Okay. So maybe, I mean, if we only look at the fairness, maybe it's less fair compared to, say, individual work, but it's just a different learning experience. It's for different purposes. Really, the group work is really meant for the group to learn from each other, and we'll try to make it fair, but it will be quite difficult to make it absolutely fair, to make sure everyone does the exact same amount, but that's also not expected for the group work. Okay, in terms of marking criteria, very quickly, so the 10% is for the in-lab group task, and then 25% for the individual work. So for the individual ones, you need to be able to display the lessons. So you would need to have a number of lessons that people can select from. You need to be able to sort them, for example, either by price or by the subject of the class. You need to have the add to cart functionality, Just like any online shops, you need a cart, and you can add things you select to the cart. Then you need the shopping cart, which can see the things people added and remove them if needed. And finally, a simple checkout. And so the checkout is almost like the registration for most sites. For example, some of the sites will require you to create an account before you can check out. But here, all you need to do is, in terms of checkout, you just enter your user information, your name and the delivery address or contact details, and then you can take and check out. And you don't need actually to add any payment functions for the app. That's not required. So the details are in the module handbook. Let me see. Yeah. I can show you quickly. If you go to module page, the module handbook will be the one on the top, which is this one. And yeah, if you scroll down a bit more, in the assessment section, it will say coursework 1, and you can see a bit more details there. So that give you more details. And actually, we're going to talk about a bit more of these details in these, no, not next week, the week after. We're going to actually go through these requirements, what you needed. But if you want, you can have a look now. These are much more detailed marking scheme there in terms of each, for example, check out what you need to do there. Okay. Okay, I got another question from Arslan in terms of how does the group work marking? No, the group work marking is the group presents as one, so you only need one presentation for the entire group, and all the group members get the same mark. We don't say, okay, say this person did this part of the the work, and so he only get marks. No, so you just get one mark for the entire work, and every group member has the same mark. Paul says, can we use a database instead of local storage? For the coursework one, only use local. It's no requirement, and they recommend using local storage. I don't even think you need. You can get away without using anything, but if you really want to, you can using database. And basically, in the first coursework, there's no marks related to the data storage, so you can choose what you want. Okay, I'm gonna cover Marcel's next one because that's exactly what I'm gonna talk to. Okay, so next question is about the markings for the group work mark. So again, it's already in the module handbook. For example, this is all the details about the first coursework. And you can see we have a separate marking scheme, so marking criteria for the in-lab group task. And you will see the requirement, and basically it will tells you what you need to do. For example, you have to display the information of just one lesson, and that counts for 3%, and what exactly information needs to be displayed, and other information. Yeah. Okay. That's all the questions. Okay, and then we come to the second coursework, which is due week 15. That's mostly covering the part related to the backend for the app. And okay, so first is creating the backend in terms saving all the data, like the list of the lessons you have, or any say shopping cart people created. And then we can, to make the app progressive, for example, then it will be able to run without internet connection by caching some of the data locally on the phone. Okay, so there's some requirements, and some of them, this is still the old one. So for example, we're gonna using REST API and need to develop the with Express, but not Mongoose. Actually, you're not allowed to use that. And the code will be in GitHub repository. And this probably is optional, it's not must. Okay, and finally you have to demonstrate. That will be the same as the last one. Okay, I have a question from Ozenk. It's about grouping of the lab groups. I think maybe Ozenk joined a little bit later. So you will be able to choose your groups, and we will do that in the lab next week. Okay, Marcel says, why not Mongoose? You can have a database without Mongoose, which we will show you how to do that in the lecture. Mongoose just enforcing a schema, which will make it more like a relational database. And you can, I can't remember, did I say you can't? Yes, so the question from the Samira, it says, are we only allowed to be in groups with the people in our labs? The answer is yes, because otherwise it's very difficult for you to work together. Why did it change from last year? It's like, I'm right. I'm not exactly sure what the last question from Marcel is. If you, okay. Hasnatming asked, is it possible to change our labs? I think it's still possible, so long as there's still space in the lab. If it's already full, then you can't change. And you probably should be able to do that yourself, just on the UniHub. There should be one function that allows you to change, if it's possible still. For example, the space. Okay, yeah, and so again, so this gives you a quick overview of what the marking criteria is for the second coursework. And again, if you need details one, just have a look at the module handbook. So that's the more detailed version there in terms of marking criteria. And because some of the things we haven't covered it yet, so it might not make sense if you look at them now, but that's completely fine. Okay, and for the last part, or the last coursework, what we do is turn what we did in the first two parts together into a mobile app. So something you can actually potentially submit it to, say, the App Store or Google Play. So for this purpose, we need to use a new library called native script to turn whatever we created so far into a proper app. Okay, again, so these are a quick view of the marking criteria, 10% for the in-lab group work and 25% for the individual work. And again, if you go back and you can see more detailed marking scheme and in the module handbook. Actually, the group task is not decided yet. I can add that a little bit later on. So same for the second group task. I'll add that soon. Whereas for the first coursework, the group task is all the details are already there in the module handbook. Okay, and Samira says, for the coursework, would we get formative feedback? The answer is yes. You can either do this in the lab or you can just say, I have this question, you can email me, or you can say, I put my code here, this is my GitHub repository, can you have a look and give me particular feedback? I can also do that. Okay. I'm going to discuss Marcel's questions later until we get to that part. Let me get back to the slides. Okay, and yeah, just a little bit more about demonstration. We said all the work needs to be demonstrated, and the lab and sorry, the group and the individual work is a bit different. So the group work will be the demonstration. So this is you present your work to the entire lab. So basically you share a screen to the entire lab and go through your code, explain, to demonstrate how it works and explain the code behind each different functions. Whereas individual work, and it will be one-to-one, so you only need to show me, not everyone else in your lab. Okay, and I already mentioned this, and so the one-to-one demonstration or the individual work demonstration always happens 2 weeks after the deadline. So we have 2 weeks, and we will have a way to book this. So let me see if I can see any booking. No, it doesn't. Maybe I can. First, I'll show you there's a way to book a slot for the individual coursework demonstration. No, it's not here either. Let me see that last year. Okay, and so when you will use something similar to book the individual slot for the coursework demonstration. So it will look something like this, and if you click, it will show you a list of available slots. This is different view. Let me change my role to a student. Okay, it's not there anymore because it's already, this is happened in the past now. So there's nothing you can choose. And so basically you're looking for something like this. And then when you clicked in, you would see, okay, all the available slots, usually 15 minutes, and you can click to say, I want to demonstrate at that time. And then you can see for that particular session, we had 1 hour and 4 15 minutes slots, and these are the students already booked for that slot. Okay, and so the next part is about the extension and late penalty. So there might be, how do I say, the university-wide extensions because of COVID, for example, that happened last year. And besides those, if there's anything else you want to apply extension for, and use extenuating circumstance form, which is just online, you can find it in your UniHub. So please don't contact me for this. And please, and even if you contact me, I would refer you to the extenuating circumstance form anyway, that's the same. And there are 2 types of extensions. One is just called extension. These are for the short ones. If you need a few more days or a few weeks. The other one is called deferral. And this is for much longer term when you have a bigger problem. And this is usually for a few months. Usually it goes to the next term or the end of current term. For example, if you apply for a deferral for the first coursework, so that might become deferred to the end of the first term, for example. Okay, and finally, we almost there, talk about the late penalty. So basically, if you miss the deadline and you will be late penalty, the submission will be still open, you'll still be able to submit, but there will be penalty. So it's 5% for each day after the deadline. So that means if you miss one day, you lose 5%. If you are 2 days late, and you lose 10%, and so on. Okay. So it is the 5% of your final mark. So it's not the 5% in the sense, let's say, for the individual work, the total is 25%. It does not mean the total will become 20% if you're 1 day late and 15% 2 days. It's not like that. It's the 5% of your final mark. Okay, so for example, and if you are 2 days late, so you will lose 10% of your final mark. But let's say your final mark is 30, that means you are going to lose 10% of that, which is 3, which give you 27. Okay, so in a sense, for example, if you just need 1 or 2 more days, there's no need to apply for extension, because you're not going to hear back from the application for a week or something. But I mean, if you just submit within 2 days, you can only lose 2%. 3 marks out of the total 30. And for example, if your final mark is 20, then that means you only lose 2 marks out of that. So it's not that much. This only becomes more significant after, for example, if you missed it by a week, then you're going to lose much more than this is. Okay. Okay, I think we're closing to the end. So, and for in-terms communication, and I do try to maintain the questions and answers section on the module page. I'm going to just show you quickly. Let's go back to this year's module. Maybe just go back. Nope. Okay, and there's this question and answers part, and essentially it's just a wiki, and you could type your questions there, and I will try to answer. And yeah, you can post questions there if it's not answered already, and because I might have answered, because your question might be asked by other students already, and I would have answered. And you can also contact me. That's my email address, which is also on the web or in the module handbook. And especially for the questions, you can't really, it's personal, it can't be shared on the wiki. And so we're probably not going to have any face-to-face, in the sense, in-person meetings, and unless it's absolutely necessary just because of the COVID. I think we can organize one-to-one, say, and Zoom calls or Skype calls or something. That's definitely possible. Just email me. But it will take longer for me to find the time compared to email. Email, I should be able to respond much faster. Okay. Okay, and now we come to the summary part now. So it's about hybrid app development and not native app development. Hopefully, I explain the difference between the two and why we choose hybrid. And we have 3 main components. These are the 3 courseworks. And one is about using Vue. The second one is about Node and MongoDB. And finally, the last one is about native script. Okay, we're going to have lots more live coding this year compared to last. And we will have group work that will be demonstrated or presented in the lab. And we can have 3 courseworks. again, all the individual coursework has to be demonstrated as well. Extension has to be applied online through extenuating circumstances, and 5% late penalty for each day after deadline. Basically, that's the 5% of your final mark. So if you only need 1 or 2 days, it does not impact your final mark that much at all. Hopefully that's explained. Okay, and finally, just give you a little bit of warning. And this is not a particularly easy module. Last year, about 30% of students did not pass in the first attempt. And that's quite high, I would say, compared to other modules. And partly because COVID situation, but I do see quite a few students struggle already as well. And it's usually recommended, or I would say I would recommend it, if you achieved a 60% or higher grade in the second year web development module. And again, this is just a recommendation. You can still take the module, even you didn't meet this criteria. This is not like a requirement, it's just a recommendation. And in terms if you are considering, say, whether to take this module or not. Okay, and also if you're not sure, you can also contact me for any specific questions in terms of module to help you decide whether this will be the right module for you. Okay, let's see if we have any other questions. And finally, the reading for this week, just the module handbook, all the details will be in there. Okay, we have a question, say, from Alex. Okay, maybe first, Alex, the ones that says group work is presented by only one person, and it's really for the group to decide. If they decide to have 1 or 2 or 3 people to present the work, that's entirely fine. And do we have SRAs in this module to guide us? Yeah, so that's something I have been trying. But to say one of the criteria for the SRA is they have to be current Middlesex student. And most of the students who did the module last year has left the university, so it's quite difficult to find someone to do the SRA. But if we can find someone like that, we definitely will. Okay, so there's some comments about final project module. So I think that's not about this module, so I'm gonna skip those. Okay, and yeah. So in terms of grouping, we're gonna do that next week. So make sure you turn up for the lab session next week, so you can find the groups you want. And otherwise, I will just put you into whatever groups do have people missing. Yeah. So do show up next week. And do we still have any other questions related to module? Okay, maybe just a quick comment. Even this not about this module in terms of the final project, you meant to look at what different individuals, say academic staffs or lecturers, what they do, find the ones which provide the project you interesting or match the areas that you want to do your final project, and then contact them and then to confirm. You only get allocated a final project supervisor if you couldn't find one this way. Then you will be randomly assigned staff to supervise your project, which might not match the areas you want in. Okay. Okay, and Marcel saying we can have a separate discussion. You can just email me after class. I'm gonna explain to you why we're not using Mongoose. Yeah. Okay. And if we don't have any other questions, I think we're gonna stop there. And okay, actually, and before we stop, can I just see a show of hands again for everyone who's still here? And do you want a break in between so during the lecture? So the lecture is 1.5 hours, which can be a bit long. So if you want have a break, please click yes or the tick. And if you don't want one, please click no. Ah, okay. I think majority, it seems, keep going. Anyone haven't voted yet? Yeah, so we have 24 no's and 4 yeses. So it looks like most of the students don't really are okay with 1.5. Let's see. Maybe you change mind after next week, but we're gonna just try again without break next week. And okay, I'm gonna hope to see you. I think that's all for today. We're gonna see you next week, and we'll start the lab. And the first week, the first lab will be quite easy. Just mostly just find your group numbers. Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna stop the Zoom session now, and see you next week.
Thank you for everything, Kai. Thank you. Bye.
No problem.
Enjoy the rest of the day,
Yeah.
man.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Thank you, Kai.
No
Thank you.
problem. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kai, hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it's Farhan. Kai, so what happened? Unfortunately, they did not updated my timetable and things.
Uh-huh.
There's my friend in the list as well in our class. So he just updated me. He called me today. He said we have a web development class. So are you coming? I said yeah, but my timetable is not updated. Could you please like updated my timetable, or could you approach them? I already emailed them twice, but I haven't got any reply from them.
Actually, I have no access to timetabling at all. So it's kind of separate. So all the timetabling are done centrally with a specific department. Actually, I don't know which one that is, which allocates student timetable.
And one more quick question.
And
Could you please
so
check?
currently, can you actually see the module page? For example, see the module page on Moodle or My Learning.
Okay.
Can you see that at all, or?
Module page on My Learning. Wait, let me go to.
Yeah. Because I think, I mean, for the lecture and labs, all you need just the Zoom links, and you can either get it from the email or just use the same one you use now.
Yeah.
It will always be the same.
Stas is my friend. He's in our class. So he just sent me the link to go join the lecture.
Yeah. So just use the same.
Okay.
It doesn't change. Yeah.
And one more thing, how we do like, what is the process like our attendance? Like if it is according to the email, or you contact us, or we just join, like I join your lecture today, is my attendance counted?
Yes. And I'm not sure so basically for this module, we're going to use whatever the system the university is using.
Okay.
And actually, I haven't got any information on what they plan to use this year. Last year, they used some apps, but that probably doesn't work anymore this year. But whatever the university decide to use, we're going to use the same.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, bye.
Can I ask you a question?